On a quiet November night in the town of Moscow, Idaho, four college students, young, vibrant, full of dreams, were brutally murdered in their own home. No screams were heard. No security cameras caught a thing. When police entered the house, it was like stepping into a waking nightmare, blood on the walls, pooling on the floors. And the killer had vanished without a trace. The case instantly gripped the nation, not just because of its brutality, but because of its mystery. There were no clear motives, no obvious suspects, until one name surfaced: Bryan Kohberger, a criminology PhD student who didn't just study serial killers. He may have become one. Police found his DNA on a military-style knife sheath left next to the bodies. Surveillance footage showed his white Hyundai Elantra circling the victim's home multiple times, especially the night of the murders. His phone went dark for hours during the exact time frame of the killings. And one surviving witness recalled seeing a masked man, tall, thin, with thick eyebrows. But Kohberger's defense hit back. No blood in his car. No DNA on his clothes. And 3 unknown male DNA samples at the scene that don't belong to him. They also questioned the science. The DNA match came from investigative genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge method using ancestry databases that's never been tested in court like this before. And then there's the biggest mystery of all, the motive. Kohberger didn't know the victims. No threats. No messages. No connections. But cell data revealed he had driven past their house at least 12 times in the weeks before the murders. Even more chilling, he returned again. Just hours after they were killed. His trial, set for the summer of 2025, won't just decide guilt or innocence. It will be a battle between science and suspicion, emotion and evidence. One side seeks justice for an unspeakable crime. The other demands proof beyond all doubt. And if convicted, Bryan Kohberger could face the death penalty. But in Idaho, that doesn't just mean a lethal injection. It could mean a firing squad. Was Bryan Kohberger truly the one who murdered 4 innocent students? Or is he the victim of a chilling chain of coincidences? The trial will decide. But for now, the truth still hides in the silence. Stay with us as we break down this haunting case, piece by piece, right after this. 4 young lives, 1 college house, 1 seemingly ordinary night. By morning, the 2nd and 3rd floors of that house were soaked in blood. No cries for help. No signs of struggle. No one saw anything unusual. But when the bodies of 4 University of Idaho students were discovered, all that remained was a haunting silence. And a mystery that gripped the entire nation. To understand why this case left America shaken, you have to understand who the victims were. They weren't loners. They weren't troubled. They were the kind of people you meet once and never forget. Kaylee Goncalves, 21, from Rathdrum, Idaho, was fire, bold, adventurous, always moving forward. She was majoring in general studies at the College of Letters, Arts and Social Sciences, and belonged to the Alpha Phi sorority, one of the most spirited groups on campus. Kaylee had a fascination with true crime, not from textbooks, but from real cases. She even contacted Moscow police a year before her death to report a suspicious disappearance. She adored her dog Murphy, who slept beside her every night like clockwork. She had plans to backpack across Europe after graduation, then settle in Texas and start fresh. But before her new chapter could begin, it ended. Kaylee had a best friend since middle school, Maddie Mogan. They did everything together. Same college, same house, even sleeping in the same bed that final night. Kaylee had moved out of the King Road home, but on that fateful night, she came back to visit Maddie. It would be her last. She was found the next morning, sitting upright in the 3rd-floor bedroom, her body riddled with stab wounds. Maddie Mogan, also 21, from Coeur d'Alene, was the calm to Kaylee's fire. She majored in marketing, was part of Pi Beta Phi, and worked at Mad Greek, not just as a waitress, but also leading the restaurant's marketing efforts. To her father, Ben Mogan, Maddie was the whole world. To her boyfriend, Jake Schreiger, she was the first message every morning and the last voice every night. That night, Kaylee and Maddie fell asleep like they had hundreds of nights before. But when police found them, they weren't best friends anymore. They were victims lying side by side in the bed they once laughed in. Xana Kernadel, 20, grew up in Post Falls, Idaho, after moving from Arizona. She was pure energy. Her family said you couldn't meet Xana and not love her. She studied marketing at the College of Business and Economics, was also in Pi Beta Phi, worked sales for Vandal Solutions, and held a job at Mad Greek too. She loved EDM concerts and had a dog named Shoeshine. As a kid, she did gymnastics and later played volleyball, track, and soccer. She lived loud, lived fully, and people loved her for it. Her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, 20, stayed over that night. Xana and Ethan had known each other for years before they began dating. That past summer, Xana spent most of it with Ethan's family. On the night of November 13th, she invited him to sleep over. They never woke up. Their bodies were discovered in Xana's second-floor bedroom. Ethan was one of triplets from Conway, Washington, and all three siblings attended the University of Idaho. He studied recreation, sport, and tourism management, and was a proud member of Sigma Chi. Ethan was the life of the party, funny, athletic, a fan of the NFL, and country music. He had that rare kind of charm. When he entered a room, people smiled. But that night, like the others, Ethan was stabbed repeatedly. No one screamed. No one had defensive wounds. Police believe it all happened too quickly for them to even react. Ethan's family later created the Ethan Smile Scholarship Fund, a painful tribute to a smile that lit up every room, and is now gone forever. 1122 King Road, a typical college house tucked in the student neighborhood of Moscow, Idaho. 3 floors, light-color walls, a small balcony, the kind of place you expect to hear laughter, late-night study sessions, and pizza deliveries. No one ever imagined it would become the site of one of the most horrifying crimes in Idaho's history. There were no signs of forced entry, no surveillance footage, no witnesses. And the killer? Gone, as if he vanished into thin air. At 11:58 a.m. on November 13, 2022, police responded to a vague 911 call placed from inside the house. What they walked into was later described by an investigator as a house that looked like it was bleeding. On the second floor, they found the bodies of Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin. On the third floor, Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan, lifeless, lying side by side. But this wasn't just a crime scene. It was a message written in blood, splattered across the walls, pooling on the floors, soaking through to the lower level. Neighbors later said they thought a pipe had burst. There was red liquid seeping down the exterior walls. Kaylee was found in a sitting position, propped against the wall, her body covered in stab wounds, too many to count at first glance. She and Maddie had been so close in life, always sleeping in the same bed. Now in death, they remained side by side, their wounds overlapping in a chilling portrait of pain and silence. The murder weapon was never recovered. But investigators believe the killer used a military-style combat knife, likely a K-bar, thick-bladed, razor-sharp, and designed for lethal force. No one knows how the killer got in without making a sound. But one thing was certain. On Maddie's bed, they found the knife's sheath. And on the button snap of that sheath, DNA. It would later match a man named Bryan Kohberger. A small, cold piece of evidence, but it would become the cornerstone of the case. At the time, though, police still had no idea who they were dealing with. And then came the strangest part. 2 people inside the house survived. Untouched. Unharmed. One of them was Dylan Mortensen, a roommate of the victims. She had been sleeping on the first floor. Around 4 a.m., Dylan heard strange noises. She thought she heard crying coming from Xana's room, followed by the sound of hurried movement. Then a man's voice, low and calm, saying, "It's okay. I'm going to help you." Dylan opened her door and saw a man dressed in black, wearing a black mask over his mouth and nose. He had bushy eyebrows and brown hair. He was walking toward the sliding glass door on the second floor. And then he was gone. Dylan didn't scream. She didn't call 911. She locked her door and froze. It wasn't until nearly 8 hours later, at 11:58 a.m., that a 911 call was made, not by Dylan, but by a friend who had been invited over after the survivors told them, "Someone upstairs isn't waking up." Later, Dylan would describe her reaction as frozen in fear, unable to process what she had seen. Some criticized her for not acting sooner. But trauma experts say, when faced with death, the brain doesn't always fight or flee. Sometimes, it shuts down completely. December 30th, 2022. Nearly 7 weeks after the brutal murders in Idaho, FBI agents and state police swarmed a house in Pennsylvania, over 2,000 miles away from the crime scene. Inside that house was Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD student in criminology at Washington State University, just 10 miles from where the killings occurred. He didn't run. He didn't resist. He only asked one question as he was placed in handcuffs. "Am I the only one who's been arrested?" Kohberger was intelligent, focused on criminal behavior, and the psychology of killers. He had even posted a now infamous survey on Reddit asking violent offenders, "How did you plan your crime? And how did it make you feel afterward?" That survey, once academic, now felt deeply chilling. But police didn't catch Kohberger through bloodstains. They caught him through a car. After witness accounts narrowed down the time frame and possible escape routes, detectives combed through hundreds of hours of surveillance footage. They found a match, a white Hyundai Elantra, seen circling the crime scene area at least 3 times around 3:30 a.m. On the morning of November 13th. By 4:20 a.m., the car was seen speeding away, just minutes after the estimated time of the murders. The license plate was unreadable. But after countless man-hours and digital analysis, police traced the vehicle to Bryan Kohberger. Then came the cell phone data. At exactly 2:47 a.m., just before the murders, Kohberger's phone went dark. No signal. No pings. Total silence. It didn't reconnect until 4:48 a.m., near his home in Pullman. A chilling digital blackout, perfectly aligned with the time of the murders and the path of that white Elantra. At the crime scene, investigators had found a military-style K-bar knife sheath left on Maddie Mogan's bed. On the sheath snap button was a trace of DNA. It matched Bryan Kohberger. That single cold fragment was the only physical evidence directly tying him to the crime scene, but it was damning. Phone records revealed something even more disturbing. In the months before the murders, Kohberger's phone had pinged near the victim's house 12 different times. And the 13th? Just hours after the crime made headlines, his phone showed he had returned to the scene. Why? Detectives believe, like many cold-blooded killers, he came back to relive it. Meanwhile, the surviving roommate, Dylan Mortensen, who briefly saw the suspect as he left the house, began to recall clearer details. A tall, thin man in black clothing, a black mask, and one key feature, bushy eyebrows. It sounded vague until investigators compared the description with Kohberger's photo. The match was unsettling. Kohberger has never confessed. His lawyers claim he is innocent. His explanation? He was out driving alone, looking at the stars or clearing his head. But if that's true, why turn off your phone? Why circle that house 12 times in the weeks before? And why is your DNA on the knife sheath left next to a victim? We know what happened. The pieces are all there: the car, the phone, the DNA, the surveillance. Even a witness. But the scariest question isn't how, it's why. Why would a criminology student, someone who studied killers for a living, choose to become one? To most people, Bryan Kohberger appeared to be just another graduate student. Quiet, reserved, a little socially distant. But when investigators began piecing his life together, small cracks in that calm exterior started to show, and what emerged was deeply unsettling. One former classmate recalled seeing Kohberger following women around the library in high school. Another remembered his obsession with extreme veganism, so intense that he refused to eat anything cooked in the same pan as meat. Individually, these quirks may seem harmless, but connected together, they paint a troubling picture: a man obsessed with control over his body, over information, and perhaps over other people. Kohberger didn't just study criminal behavior. He immersed himself in it. At Washington State University, he wasn't just enrolled in the criminology PhD program, he participated in advanced discussions on the minds of serial killers. He even created a survey on Reddit asking convicted criminals to describe how they planned their crimes and how they felt before, during, and after committing them. On paper, it was academic research, but in the context of this case, it reads more like a premonition, as if Kohberger wasn't just studying violence. He was preparing for it. When he was arrested, he didn't panic. He didn't cry. He didn't protest. He asked just one chilling question: am I the only one who's been arrested? To the investigators, that question felt like a punch in the gut. Not the words of a man falsely accused, but of someone checking if the plan had failed, or if someone else had slipped up. After that, he went silent. In jail surveillance footage, Kohberger is seen sitting motionless in solitary confinement for hours. Not reading, not sleeping, not talking, just staring at the wall, expressionless. No remorse, no fear, only emptiness. As if his mind had already left this world, or was still trapped somewhere in the darkness of King Road. While investigators struggled through a maze of fragmented clues, the Goncalves family refused to sit still. They stood up, not because they thought they were smarter than the police, but because their daughter had died in silence, and they couldn't let the truth die with her. Olivia Goncalves, Kaylee's older sister, became the fire that kept the family moving forward. She didn't wait for reports. She opened Kaylee's phone, went through the final call logs, and began dialing one number at a time, as if searching for some last flicker of her sister's soul. Finally, someone answered. A friend remembered seeing Kaylee and Maddie at the corner club bar until 1:07 a.m. He said they ordered a ride home. Olivia tracked down the driver. But the most critical lead didn't come from words. It came from a mac and cheese truck. That's right. A local food truck called Grub Truck had security cameras, and those cameras captured Kaylee and Maddie standing in line, ordering food, laughing, just before heading home. Thanks to the footage and the rideshare driver, Olivia confirmed they were dropped off at 1:56 a.m. Not 2:07, as the police had previously stated. That 11-minute discrepancy in a homicide case could mean everything. Then came the chilling detail. The killer went straight to the third floor, where Kaylee and Maddie slept. He didn't fumble. He didn't check rooms. He knew where he was going, which meant he knew the house. It suggested something terrifying. Bryan Kohberger may have been inside 1122 King Road before the night of the murders. He wasn't just watching from outside. He was familiar with the layout. Kaylee's mother believes the killer came for one person, but upon finding two in the room, eliminated both to leave no witnesses. And then there was Murphy. Kaylee's beloved dog was found unharmed in a separate room. Why? Had Kohberger seen the dog before? Did he bring something to calm it down? Did he move it before the killings? Each new question only added fuel to the family's theory that Kohberger knew the house, knew the routines, and knew exactly what he came to do. After Kohberger's name went public, Olivia kept digging. She found an Instagram account the family believes belonged to him. The account followed all three female victims and had liked multiple posts of Maddie. According to reports, Kohberger had even DM'd one of them repeatedly, messages like, "Hey, how are you?" But none were ever answered. If proven in court, these findings could be a digital smoking gun, a direct link between Kohberger and his victims. And that could crush the defense's central claim, that there was no connection at all. Then came a theory that sent chills through the courtroom, the kill kit. Investigators believe Kohberger brought a backpack to the scene, inside a change of clothes to wear after the murders. And that would explain the most bizarre part of this case: no blood in his car. No victim DNA in his apartment. Nothing. During the search of his apartment, police found a receipt from Walmart. The Goncalves family believes the receipt proves he bought clothing that might have been used during the attack. Strangely, those clothes were never found in his apartment afterward. The Goncalves family didn't just grieve. They acted. And thanks to Olivia, thanks to her questions, theories, and relentless search for answers, the official investigation had no choice but to shift direction. Down a darker road. A narrower path. But maybe the right one. A path that may end where it all began, inside a house Kohberger might have walked through long before taking 4 lives within it. The trial of Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students in their sleep, was originally set for October 2nd, 2023. But then, something unexpected happened. Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial. In other words, he wanted a delay, as long as possible. To prepare? To stall? Or to slowly stretch the truth until it breaks. His defense team didn't walk into court with weapons, but with something just as sharp: reasonable doubt. And they aimed straight at the case's cornerstone, the DNA. They claimed there were 3 unknown male DNA samples at the scene. 2 were found inside the house. 1 on a glove found just outside the crime scene. None of them matched Kohberger. They asked, who were these men? Why weren't they thoroughly investigated? Could someone else be moving in the shadows of this crime? But they didn't stop there. The defense demanded the exclusion of the DNA evidence from a knife sheath, arguing that the FBI had used a relatively new technique called investigative genetic genealogy. This method doesn't rely on a direct blood match. Instead, it uses public ancestry databases like GeneMatch or 23andMe to trace DNA through familial lines, essentially building a genetic family tree until they narrow in on suspect. The defense's argument? They didn't find Kohberger through blood. They found him through a family tree. And that, they said, was dangerous and legally untested in criminal courts. Then came another chilling argument. There was no connection between Kohberger and the victims. No texts, no calls, no threats, no motive. If he didn't know them, why would he kill them? They also pointed to the brutal and chaotic nature of the crime scene. Yet there wasn't a single drop of blood found in Kohberger's car, apartment, or on his clothes. Too clean. Suspiciously clean. If he was the killer, the defense asked, where's the mess? Kohberger, for his part, offered an alibi. He claimed he was driving alone that night, to relax, to think, to look at the stars. There were no witnesses. No confirmation. But surveillance footage and phone data put his car near the crime scene that night. The defense shrugged. He often drove late at night. That wasn't unusual. But for the victims' families, there was nothing coincidental about this. They didn't need DNA, or cell towers, or GPS. They looked at the carnage and saw something else. This wasn't about rage or revenge. This was pleasure. This was compulsion. This was the work of someone who planned to kill, selected his victims, and found satisfaction in their deaths. Some experts agreed. The nature of the attack, sudden, silent, and savage, the simultaneous murder of 4 people, mostly while they were asleep, suggested this wasn't random. It was calculated. Then, Kohberger's defense team made another bold move, accusing the prosecution of withholding key evidence. They claimed the state failed to turn over crucial materials on time, including full surveillance footage, detailed analysis of Kohberger's cell phone data, and internal documentation on the methods used to track DNA. The defense didn't hold back. They used the words, evidence suppression. This trial won't just be a courtroom battle. It will be a test of what we know and what we can prove. One side has the knife sheath, the cell data, the surveillance footage. The other side offers missing blood, mysterious DNA, and the question, why? One side wants closure. The other wants doubt and delay. Where it ends, we don't know yet. But the trial is set to begin on June 30th, 2025. Until then, all we have are questions. And the stakes. They couldn't be higher. Despite every motion and objection from the defense, Judge Stephen Hippler made one thing absolutely clear. If convicted, Bryan Kohberger could face the death penalty. No ambiguity. No hesitation. And the prosecution didn't flinch either. They stated, we intend to seek the death penalty. Not only because the evidence is sufficient, but because this crime demands the highest punishment the law allows. The defense wasn't done. Kohberger's lawyers launched a series of arguments to eliminate the possibility of the death penalty. First argument, autism spectrum disorder. They claimed that Kohberger had been diagnosed with ASD, and that executing someone with such a diagnosis would be unethical, carry a high risk of miscarriage of justice, and go against the core of what justice stands for. The prosecution struck back hard. Autism is not an intellectual disability. And the U.S. Supreme Court has been clear, only individuals with intellectual disabilities can be exempt from capital punishment. Kohberger, they said, has mild autism without any cognitive impairment. The judge agreed. Argument denied. Second argument, inhumane punishment and execution method. The defense argued that keeping someone on death row for years is cruel, and pointed to the fact that Idaho allows execution by firing squad. They called it arbitrary, unconstitutional. The judge barely blinked. Idaho's death penalty statute is legal. There is no basis to call it inhumane. Argument denied. Third argument, violation of international treaties. The defense cited treaties banning the torture of prisoners, claiming Idaho's capital punishment system violates international human rights law. The court's response, once again denied. Fourth argument, inability to effectively carry out execution. They claimed Idaho no longer has access to lethal injection drugs. That keeping someone in limbo, on death row with no ability to execute, is cruel and unusual. The judge acknowledged the shortage, but dismissed the argument. It doesn't affect the legality of the death sentence. In the end, all defense motions were struck down, and the death penalty still hangs over Bryan Kohberger like a modern-day sword of Damocles. If you're wondering about how executions work in Idaho, the system is undergoing dramatic change. Idaho is one of 27 states in the U.S. that still allows capital punishment. Its primary method, lethal injection. But there's a problem. Pharmaceutical companies have refused to supply execution drugs. And in March 2025, facing a total drug shortage, Governor Brad Little signed a new law. If lethal injection is unavailable, execution by firing squad will be used. That law takes effect on July 1, 2026, making Idaho the only U.S. state to authorize the firing squad as a default method. If convicted, Bryan Kohberger could die by a needle or by a bullet. And every time his defense team tries to block the death penalty, the court shuts them down. one by one, like doors closing behind him. Still, the death penalty is never a guarantee. It remains one of the hardest punishments to secure under U.S. law, and many variables can shift a case's outcome. So we wait, and hope that justice, in the end, will prevail. But outside the courtroom, another trial is underway, noisier, harsher, and with no rules, the court of public opinion. Some believe Bryan Kohberger is innocent, a man framed by fuzzy evidence and forensic gaps. Others believe he is evil incarnate, a highly intelligent, cold, meticulous killer. Every time he walks into the courthouse, his every movement is dissected. His eyes, his posture, his expression. Every leaked document becomes a storm of analysis online. And while the legal system moves carefully, the internet has already rendered 1,000 verdicts. The upcoming trial won't just determine guilt or innocence. It will be a stress test for the American justice system. Can truth survive the noise of modern media? Can emotional crimes be judged with logic and law? And can families who lost everything ever find peace? That answer, like so many others, still waits behind the doors of that courtroom. After every nightmare, there are ashes. But in the massacre that shook Moscow, Idaho, those ashes weren't just tears and sorrow. They became the seeds of legacy. For young lives, for futures unfinished. And the people who love them are still here, carrying the memory like a scar that never heals, but also like a light that never goes out. The victims' families endured the most devastating kind of grief, sudden, brutal loss, followed by a relentless storm of media, investigations, and legal battles. Kaylee Goncalvez's family refused to stay silent. Her parents showed up again and again in front of cameras, demanding answers, questioning inconsistencies, and holding the justice system accountable. Not for revenge, but because, if she can no longer speak, we will be her voice. Kaylee never made it to graduation, but the University of Idaho gave her something powerful in her absence, an honorary degree. A quiet, solemn acknowledgement that she earned it, even if the ending broke us all. Ethan Chapin loved tulips. He was cheerful, generous, a bright light in any room. And instead of letting grief consume them, his family built something lasting. Ethan's Smile, a scholarship fund born out of heartbreak. They planted tulips, sold flowers, and used the money to help other students, those with the same smile and spirit Ethan once shared. Kaylee and Maddie were best friends. They lived together, studied together, and in the end, died together. Kaylee's sister, Olivia Goncalves, did something no one expected. She named her newborn daughter, Theodora Madison Kay. Madison for Maddie, Kay for Kaylee. My daughter will never meet her Aunt Kaylee or her godmother Maddie. But every time I say her name, I remember them. And through her, they live on in our blood, our words, our memories. These gestures can't erase the crime. They can't bring back the 4 lives stolen. But they can ensure they're never forgotten. In every tulip bloom, in a graduation seat left empty, in the laugh of a child named after 2 girls who once lit up the world. What do you think about this case? Is Bryan Kohberger truly guilty? And if so, should he face the death penalty? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're drawn to real stories that shock, disturb, and sometimes defy belief, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.